Bitcoin has emerged as an institutional grade asset, but really only 5% of the population understands this. We do believe there is no better asset to put our medium to long-term treasury versus other alternatives. The opportunity that we see in terms of Bitcoin adoption is so immense, and we believe that we are all really on the cusp of a major new inflection point for Bitcoin adoption. What you have to ask yourself is, can I innovate at the level of Nvidia? And if I cannot, I need to innovate at the level of MicroStrategy, which is buy Bitcoin. Once you've created a good business, that's when we think about Bitcoin. So whether it's a short-term swing in Bitcoin's price or a short-term swing in Fold's equity, it doesn't faze us. 90% of the world is not ready, does not understand the power and changes that it will enact. Building in the Bitcoin space has been one of the best and most exciting parts of my life because the caliber of entrepreneurs, the grit and the vision is extraordinary.
You buy Bitcoin, you hold it for more than 4 years, Joe. That's my advice to everybody.
Fair to say you simply flooded the system with money.
Yes, we did. That's another way to think about it.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally.
I'm very bullish on the long-term viability of Bitcoin.
I was going to say, did that surprise you?
That surprised me how much that's gone up.
Hey, Internet, welcome back to another episode of New Foundations, the podcast brought to you by Acropolis, the Bitcoin Treasury company. In the studio this week, as always, with my co-founder, co-host, and CEO of Acropolis, Chase Palmieri, and we're joined by Will Reeves. Will is the CEO of Fold, a Bitcoin financial services company, which is now public under the ticker FLD, and also one of the top 25 Bitcoin holders of all public companies. So as we are a Bitcoin treasury company, I think we've got some pretty great questions for you that hopefully you haven't been asked before. So welcome to the pod, Will.
Thanks, guys. Excited to be here. Talk treasury, talk Bitcoin.
Yeah, let's start with, how would you describe Michael Saylor's strategy with MicroStrategy in the capital markets?
I think he's ultimately taking advantage of a major imbalance of two financial systems rising, and he is taking advantage of the fact of there is a harsh reality happening in the fiat world where yields and the ability to build your investments have increasingly found it difficult with the rising pace of inflation and the lack of better new options available to a large pool of trapped capital. And at the same time, Bitcoin has emerged as an institutional grade asset, but really only 5% of the population understands this. And so Michael Saylor's taking advantage of these two opportunities, meeting in the middle, where both the traditional financial system finds a solution in Michael Saylor's product, and Michael Saylor finds a solution to his desire to accumulate more Bitcoin via this problem that TradFi is facing. And so it is a very unique point in history, and it is one that will disproportionately benefit the first movers in the space who get onto it.
And you recently did your first Bitcoin convert, which I heard you say increased Fold's holdings by 50%. So my question is, knowing what you know about this strategy and how it creates enterprise value, and now with the access that you have with FLD to tap the capital markets, do you almost feel like you have a fiduciary duty to run this playbook to some degree?
So I think it is important to note that Fold has been building a treasury since day one, since we were a private company. So this is not something we adopted because we were going to be a public company or as a public company. It's really core to our mission. We want to be aligned with our customers who are saving in Bitcoin for the long term, and the company is doing so at the same time. We think that alignment really speaks volumes, and we know our brand and our customers recognize that. Secondarily, we do believe there is no better asset to put our medium to long-term treasury into Bitcoin than versus other alternatives. That has proven correct for our 5-year history over a couple cycles at this point, being able to see the benefits there. But what we really look at as a company building Bitcoin financial services, we're looking at a future where Bitcoin denominated financial services will be incredibly important. And the fiat world and fiat financial services aren't necessarily equipped to do so. And so for us to provide the best Bitcoin financial services, we need a Bitcoin treasury to back that up, to allow that innovation, to allow a balance sheet to support those types of services. And this can go from trading to insurance to lending, really across the board. Having access to a lot of Bitcoin as a first mover in Bitcoin financial services is unique advantage to us. And so we really look at the treasury as very mutually beneficial to the operating company. We believe that our treasury will add a multiple to our operating company, and our operating company, as it achieves cash flows, as we are able to tap the public markets to bring in more Bitcoin, will of course reinforce the treasury. And so we have been absolutely inspired and see the Michael Saylor playbook. But for us, there's another step to that. It is the acquisition of the Bitcoin. And immediately we are thinking about how that Bitcoin acquired can have direct benefits to the operating company, with the idea that those benefits will ultimately allow us to accumulate more Bitcoin through the operating company itself. And so, absolutely, yes, he has pioneered a lot of the tools. But I think for us, we take a slightly different approach and look at our treasury. Not just, we are not a treasury company. We are a Bitcoin financial services company with a large Bitcoin treasury that is going to help us power and create the next generation of Bitcoin financial services.
Maybe just to double click on that. So last week we had Larry Lepard on the podcast, and the reason I asked that question is because he was talking about how financial advisors, wealth managers, he thinks we're getting to this tipping point where there might be class action lawsuits for these financial advisors who have recommended clients not explore Bitcoin or have not ever brought a Bitcoin allocation into the conversation on behalf of their clients. And I guess what I'm thinking is, for a company that understands Bitcoin, understands the Michael Saylor playbook in capital markets, and now has access to those capital markets, I almost wonder if you consider the legal term of a fiduciary duty to run the playbook to some degree.
Absolutely, and I think to Larry's or Lawrence's first comment there about a wave of class action lawsuits from financial advisors who are not recommending Bitcoin. A lot of them were actually operating from the exact opposite standpoint up until 2 years ago, which is risking a class action lawsuit for recommending Bitcoin. And the career risk Overton window is completely changed. And I think that's a very real possibility and outcome. And for us, we not only have the track record that shows what value our treasury has brought to the company already in our history, but also the opportunity that we see in terms of Bitcoin adoption is so immense. And we believe that we are all really on the cusp and the precipice of a major new inflection point for Bitcoin adoption, both at the sovereign, corporate, and retail level, that for us to make a decision not to actively pursue these, I would agree with you, would be a breach of our fiduciary duty. If we did not believe the opportunity was there, that would not support the vision we have for the operating company itself. And so for us, it is incredibly important to make sure the operating company is in a position to efficiently accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible, but at the same time, take full advantage of the new tools at our disposal to rapidly accumulate Bitcoin in what we believe is a very special window to do so. We're not going to be talking the same way about Bitcoin treasury companies in 5 years. The entire landscape will be different. The reasons for acquiring Bitcoin will also be different, and some of the tools will as well. And so I would say, yes, I think it is part of my fiduciary duty to do that. And that is reflective both from the operating company and our mission, our reason for being, but also I believe this window is small.
It's refreshing to hear you say that, Will, because the team at Acropolis today actually put out a piece of research comparing MicroStrategy and Nvidia, as both of them have been the best two performing equities over the last 5 years, with obviously very, very different strategies. Nvidia's is to relentlessly innovate in chips and compute, and MicroStrategy, or now Strategy, their strategy is to relentlessly accumulate Bitcoin. And we say internally and with clients all the time that it's not an either or. You need to find a good mixture of both, and that you're still providing real value to the world and real products and services, not just because you're a Bitcoin treasury company. It's kind of the same as just because you're an internet company in the 1990s or the early 2000s doesn't mean that you should be highly valued. So love hearing you say that.
I think it's a great those it's a great I think it's a great way to frame it, because at the end of the day it's like where are we allocating capital as capital allocators, as operating these companies. And there's two ways to look at this hurdle rate. There's the hurdle rate that we've spoken about Bitcoin, and that is a much more, in some ways, a much more passive thing. It is actually allocating our available cash and cash flows into Bitcoin, and it's in Bitcoin. The other is M&A, which is M&A in kind of more in innovation projects that has traditionally been where a lot of capital has received, just because companies need to find growth, and so they will throw a disproportionate amount of capital that way. Now, 90% of that capital that goes that way goes to waste, does not even actually keep up with the returns of the S&P. So it's an enormously risky thing. And what you have to ask yourself is, can I innovate at the level of Nvidia? And if I cannot, I need to innovate at the level of MicroStrategy, which is buy Bitcoin. And for 90% of companies, there will be the latter. A strategy will be the right thing. But when the time is right, when the opportunity is right, Fold will be and I will be the first one to say, invest in your future. I do believe that companies will be able to produce returns that outperform Bitcoin in some cases, in rare cases, and that will happen. But that is going to happen for exceptional operators and innovators, and it's going to create this huge chasm in the market where I think it is going to lead to much better allocation of capital, a lot less destructive uses of it. But at the same time, it just makes it really clear. Are you an NVIDIA level innovator in terms of what you're doing in your space? And if not, you have to be following the strategy, Bitcoin Treasury company strategy.
Embrace the future of corporate finance with Acropolis, your strategic partner for a Bitcoin treasury strategy. We're the experts your business needs. Acropolis offers trusted Bitcoin advisory. We provide you with an outsourced Bitcoin strategy officer, world-class research, and a creative financing team, and more, so you can navigate Bitcoin's market with confidence and acumen. Best-in-class custody with multi-institution custody. Eliminate the risk of loss while maintaining full control of real Bitcoin. Acropolis exclusively uses multi-institution custody as the safest and easiest way for businesses to hold Bitcoin. Bitcoin-only solutions. The Acropolis platform is designed for businesses of all sizes to seamlessly manage their Bitcoin treasury, and we focus solely on Bitcoin to offer you the most specialized services available. Adding Bitcoin to your balance sheet is just the beginning. With Acropolis, you're not just adopting Bitcoin, you're mastering its strategic use to create and maintain value for generations. Take the first step and start your corporate Bitcoin journey with Acropolis. Book your free consultation today at acropolistreasury.com/book and start implementing our proven strategies within days. As you said, Fold has been actively accumulating Bitcoin for years at this point, and we speak to companies every day about this. A lot of them are on the fence. I think the biggest concern at this point is volatility. What would you say to a company that is considering an allocation to Bitcoin for the treasury?
We look at this very similar, and of how we speak about it to our customers. We believe any of your savings or capital that is for a mid to long term hold should belong in Bitcoin. And now we think that percentage is totally dependent on a case by case basis. But any capital that you are considering that's going to be holding for a few years or more, it for us is an obvious choice to put into Bitcoin. Now we all have to manage our day to day, and that's something that is going to be really dependent on the needs of the individual or the needs of the business. Some are more capital heavy and need to have access to a lot of quick and easy money. Now there's opportunities with Bitcoin lending that is starting to innovate to a level that maybe could start to alleviate this friction point, but it's not there yet. And we look at first and foremost, you're here to secure your life for you, your family, and creating a good business. Once you've created a good business, that's when we think about Bitcoin. That's when we think about storing the fruits of our labor in Bitcoin in a way that our wealth can be preserved. And I think once you have a good grasp of what your business is and what you do, it becomes actually pretty clear on what should go in Bitcoin and what should not. But that again is going to be purely case by case.
So to put a concrete example on it, what has sitting on the Bitcoin treasury allowed Fold to do that it wouldn't have been able to do if it was holding traditional treasury reserve assets for all these years?
Early days, number one, I would say it extended our revenues, our runways significantly, allowed us to understand that we were operating and building a business in a industry with very violent cycles. But if you understood that and really grokked where these cycles are coming from, and you could actually use these cycles to your advantage. And so Fold did that very successfully, allowing us to extend runway at times that allowed us to build more confidently, and ultimately survive and thrive to this day. So number one, having the right balance of where my medium to long-term capital is versus short-term day-to-day needs, managing that and understanding where you are in the various point of the cycles purely led to not only survival but thriving as an early stage company. It meant that we had to raise less money. And you look at Fold compared to a lot of the other Bitcoin companies in the space. Early days Fold was had far less funding, on orders of magnitude less funding, and we were able to compete and build a very large product and one of the best brands in the space because we managed that. And Bitcoin as a treasury played a key role in that. And we had the obvious help is that we have revenues that are actually native in Bitcoin. Not all of a Bitcoin we buy is that we get our fiat and then convert it into Bitcoin. Fold is receiving native Bitcoin in fees and revenue every single day. And that is a unique advantage we have. At the end of the day, it's who can accumulate Bitcoin for the most efficient ways. That's about as efficient as you can possibly get. We are receiving Bitcoin for under spot, without any of the overhead that miners might have. So I think that was pretty important in the early days. Now, once that treasury really started to grow and get to a size, and our product was in a matured spot, we had more needs, we had more capital needs, we had more funds flow requirements, and being able to use and leverage our Bitcoin treasury to bring down costs of capital, to make the company more credit worthy, to allow us to offer better rates and lower fees to our customers, to allow snappier, better user experiences, where we are not necessarily having to tap into third-party desks to do things. We can interface against our own treasury. It has led to user experience improvements. It has led to lower costs and fees for our customers, lower cost of capital for our business to manage our funds flows. And I think it's really just the tip of the iceberg. Once we look in the future, the majority of our customers have 30-40% of their net worth in Bitcoin. It's a lot. And once you have that, you realize you're operating with the majority of your savings in an asset that really doesn't have a fully matured financial ecosystem around it yet. It's really just starting to happen. And so things like Bitcoin-denominated insurance, so that you're not getting insurance policies on $50,000, you're getting it on the Bitcoin that you have. Things like that require a balance sheet that is denominated in Bitcoin to provide. And we intend to be a first mover in this space. And so it is incumbent on us to build a treasury to unlock the services that we will need. So I think as you see in the future, you're going to see a lot more actual novel Bitcoin financial services that were made possible because of the treasury.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of great points, and we actually call out some of these in one of our other research reports called Bitcoin for Startups, where we talk about the ways that having, taking whatever it is, a percentage of your Series A round and putting it in Bitcoin can not only extend your runway, but if you don't have to touch that capital for a while, you could theoretically not have to go back out and raise ever again, which allows you to not dilute ownership of the business. But not only that, the huge distraction that fundraising takes the toll on the executive team. So yeah, having Bitcoin in your treasury, so long as you can hold it for 4+ years, really is a superpower. And you called out Fold's Bitcoin native revenue, and that actually ties into my next question, which is whether or not Fold has a North Star Bitcoin metric. So we hear MicroStrategy talk about Bitcoin per share and Bitcoin yield. I heard you mention Bitcoin native revenue. Is there a Bitcoin related metric that you prefer to track internally?
Yeah, so we track this on two fronts, and I think it illuminates how we think about our treasury because we believe Bitcoin per share is important, not only from the fact of Fold receiving Bitcoin native revenues. One way that we believe we're going to deliver value back to our shareholders is not just because we're at the forefront at expanding the network effects of Bitcoin itself with new customers using our platform, but also being as exposed to the upside of the underlying asset as possible. And so for us, Bitcoin per share is important, and you'll see it on two fronts. Number one, how we go out and use our status as a public company and the tools that are available to us to increase that opportunistically, just like the convert we did, and we look to have a few announcements in the coming year that will support that as well. But also how Bitcoin native cash flows and revenues can increase Bitcoin per share over time programmatically every single day. And so what we do at Fold is a 24/7 buyer of Bitcoin. Our first product was rewards. Every time our customers swipe a card, every time our customers use an offer, and every time they buy Bitcoin, Fold is stacking Bitcoin. When our customers stack, Fold stacks together. And we think that is a really interesting way of looking at Bitcoin per share because that's not a dilutive way of accumulating more Bitcoin onto the balance sheet. And so it's a very efficient way, and it is not at the scale that meets our last convert at 400, but we do believe over time that will become the central story of how Fold increases Bitcoin per share is through the most efficient, non-dilutive way possible. Because if you think about it, if some of these treasury companies are going out there and assuming massive dilution for the amount of Bitcoin they bring onto their balance sheet, that has worked. We do believe dilution can be accretive, and we are doing that ourselves. But at the same time, if we can show that yes, maybe the amount of Bitcoin gross is less, the actual, when you compare it to the dilutive aspects of other tools, it's a very, very intriguing path to increasing treasury. So Bitcoin per share is very important to illuminate both of those, opportunistic stacking and programmatic. But we also have this mindset at Fold of how can we monitor and measure the impacts that having a treasury has on the operating company in terms of delivering more revenue, income to the business. So how can we measure why having a treasury has a multiplying factor on the operating company in terms of, hey, because we have our treasury of the size it is, we get to, our cost of capital drops 200 basis points, things like that can really stack up. And so we both want to show it both ways, both how we are adding to Bitcoin per share, but also how the Bitcoin treasury can measurably improve and optimize the core operating business. I think those are the two things that we will start to talk a lot about.
I think the efficiency aspect is really important. And we hear Tether get a lot of praise because of their revenue per employee.
Mm.
And so maybe just a metric for you to chew on in your own time that I've been hearing kind of circle around more and more is the idea of Bitcoin native revenue per employee, or perhaps Bitcoin per employee as it relates to Treasury versus headcount. So anyway, those are some other kind of
Yeah,
Bitcoin efficiency type metrics to be tracking for you and for the companies that we're dealing
I
with.
think that's really smart.
Fold currently holds 1,485 Bitcoin. Congratulations. That's a really nice stack. But that qualifies for Bitwise's Bitcoin Standard Corporation's ETF for companies that have over 1,000 Bitcoin in their treasury. Have you seen noticeable inflows from this ETF already, or how has that been going?
Yeah, we qualified back in March. Now, what we are seeing, especially Fold coming in from a SPAC, and what you'll see naturally with SPACs is this kind of cycling out of initial SPAC investors with new investors who are bought in specifically to the story, and we believe the ETFs are a critical part of that. In fact, we just ask another benefit of having a Bitcoin treasury is just you have more ability to be included in ETFs that are like this. And so those are the passive flows. And as Fold, as a small cap company, our core bread and butter is going to be not the bulge bracket banks, but really ETFs. It is going to be family offices that are aligned with our mission, but also the profile of our equity. And so we are seeing today a transition of original SPAC investors, and our SPAC was initially kicked off in 2021, and so it's been a long time for some investors that have been in that SPAC, and we have been seeing the active kind of swapping out of those actors to ones that are more aligned with the Treasury, the operating company, and Bitcoin overall as kind of our core to our mission.
Nice. And the next few questions we have for you are less about Fold so much as your role at Fold now having taken the company public. So, here we are speaking, you're talking to us, two entrepreneurs who've only ever operated private businesses. I'm curious if you feel like only now you're playing in the big leagues, or is it still mostly the same game? How can you maybe kind of ground somebody like Mason and I, who've only ever operated private businesses, into thinking about what that, shift has been like?
Yeah, I've gotten a few of these questions from friends and people that I and teammates, and I think one frame to think about it is building a company is it's almost like you are developing a chessboard yourself for a challenge that you're trying to solve. You have the right players that you have brought onto your team to accomplish these goals, and you really have just a few and your investors around that are kind of on the board with you, or they're at least just sitting off watching the game unfold. um, the main difference that I've seen is that your chessboard that you've created is now on top of a chessboard with a bunch of other chessboard games happening at the same time. And that is reflective of you are not here with just investors who are aligned with your singular vision, but you're now just part of a public market where you're part of various macro dynamics. You are part of an investor base who is not necessarily aligned with your business, but finds value in using your business for some sort of other outcome, whether they're short or long, but they may not fully, care about what your business is, but they like the profile to achieve a certain end. And so I think it just adds another dimension to operating the company. Whereas before it was something that was a much smaller group. You could have a much easier way to communicate with your team and your investors. But having to be, being beholden and earning the trust of a wider investor set that is not just institutional investors, but also retail investors is a whole nother dynamic. And especially when, we got a good example of this is I think we listed, and then the day after that, we had the trade wars began and the tariffs, and it's just one of those things. This case, we're off to the races. We are in the arena, and we are definitely needing to, I think, communicate a lot more and in different ways than we previously had. But at the same time, Fold is still we're a small cap company as a public company. And to some extent, our vision, our mission, and the goals we need to achieve are the exact same. We are here to build the number one platform for Bitcoin accumulation, and we are here to build a company that efficiently accumulates Bitcoin as a result of the success of achieving that initial vision. And that involves bringing in the right people onto the team. And being a public company has absolutely helped us unlock some tremendous new talent that has joined us over the last few months that I think will really show their imprint on the future of Fold over the coming months. And so, team has been incredible. Obviously, the tools at your disposal, where you can find capital and investment, are entirely different and a lot more varied. Um, and so, I'd say, really where it matters, it hasn't really changed much. The mission and vision is still the same, and the day-to-day, the team is the same. Now, my job specifically and who I speak to has changed in some very, very big ways. And I'm lucky to have brought on some incredible team members and executives that have, helped me, give me the space to evolve. As we know, as entrepreneurs here, you're pretty much asked to evolve out of your role every 6 to 9 months, and this is just a big one, albeit, but this is just another example of that.
Yeah, and you mentioned, since Fold came public, we had the tariffs and we had a corresponding Bitcoin dip. And so obviously Fold's stock price is down a bit right now. And I guess that's one aspect that I don't envy about running a public company. So I'm curious how you are, for the first time, navigating these kinds of short-term concerns amongst employees and shareholders in a company that is, very much built on a long-term thesis. So has this been a bigger distraction than you expected before coming public? How are you handling it?
So I think this is a great topic because Fold started. We were a Bitcoin company, and our shareholders, our investors, and our team came to Fold to achieve a long-term vision of Bitcoin adoption and Bitcoin being a fundamental aspect of the mainstream financial system. And along that journey, in between, there's going to be a ton of volatility on a month-to-month basis. And Fold has always been at the whim of that volatility. And it's been us to manage that with a strategic Bitcoin treasury, managing our cash flows for short-term needs. Okay, where do we think we are in the cycle, bear market, bull market? We've already been very beholden to short-term volatility as a Bitcoin company. It's natural to us. So to us, this doesn't really affect us at all. Our team members don't think about it, just that they really don't think about a $10,000 swing in Bitcoin's price on a given day. It's just once you're here for the long term and having developed the investor base and a team that is aligned to that long term, this, whether it's a short-term swing in Bitcoin's price or a short-term swing in Fold's equity, it doesn't phase us. And I think that is actually going to be an unexpected um, uh, uh, competitive advantage that we have. Like, we've already gone through what deep volatility means by keeping our eye on the long term, but know that the violence is going to happen in the short term. And it's part of our DNA. And so, to be honest, it's just another ticker that is swinging wildly, but one that we believe in what the long-term vision is. And there's a separate aspect of this of us about building a public company is that many people don't know is that we're obviously here building an operating company to have great business, deliver great services to customers over the long term. But there also we have to be building the company, the equity of the company and its profile. And just like there's a customer for Fold's operating company, there's specific customers for Fold's equity now. And there are customers that we can't really access today, but as we build the equity and kind of engineer it in certain ways, we can get access to it. So it kind of becomes just part of optimizing our business, but it's a brand new side of it, of increasing the equity base and our total addressable kind of investor base out there. And so I think I've been thinking a lot about that, but you know, I think I was worried about it initially about I had a big presentation to the team saying, hey, here's what to expect. We're small cap, jumping into a very volatile environment. We're going to go up and we're going to go down and we're going to go up. And we need to keep our eye on the prize just like we have always done. And I think that message was really natural and resonated both our largest investors, both new ones that are on board today, but also our team members. And so I think building in Bitcoin over the last couple cycles has certainly allowed us to manage this. Might have been rougher if we didn't have that experience.
Yeah, it's almost like the most volatile thing you could engineer would be a small cap public company with a Bitcoin treasury.
Yes. And hey, we this is where Saylor, I think a lot of his incredible insights have come into, in that volatility is vitality. And when you actually think about the product that he is selling, it actually does boil down to the volatility he is able to create. And when you think about it that way, um, Fold sits at the extreme of the volatility spectrum. And so I am confident that we are going to find the ways and the mechanisms to expose that volatility in ways that are creative, and we can use that to our advantage. Whereas, a TradFi company or a traditional company without a Bitcoin treasury, I think would be very scared about volatility. Whereas we can fully embrace it, not only because it's a competitive advantage that we're working on Bitcoin and 90% of the world is not ready, does not understand the power that it and changes that it will enact. We understand it, and that's an insight that we get. And because of that, it's going to be very volatile. But also because of where we sit in the profile of our company, we'll have just natural volatility extremes. And what Saylor has shown is that capturing that volatility is capturing the lightning in the bottle. That's what you need to package. And I think Fold is developing that package now.
I mean, it's really a corollary for life. The idea of a low time preference. If you're training for a marathon, there's going to be days where there's a lot of volatility. Maybe it's not something you enjoy, but you have your eyes on the prize. You're pushing towards something. And if you can have that low time preference, and as you said, it's seemingly changed the talent that's coming into your team. It's changed the way that you guys look at building product. So that's, it's something that we want to encourage to every company with Acropolis. What about your work life or personal life has changed most since going public?
Well, I sit here as I'm currently moving homes. I have a 2-year-old. I have a wife who's like, in it with me, has essentially been building the other side of what it takes to build Fold for the last 5 years. And so I have all the pieces, but I also have taken on everything, going public process, building a Bitcoin company, building a family at the same time. And it's definitely been it's been a lot. But what I've really learned, I learned this early, is this is what is so important, to constantly be obsessed about the profile of the team that we have, not only to allow myself to continue to scale and to provide the company, to provide what the company needs, and that is constantly changing, and I often need to be the one at the tip of the spear doing that. But also for the rest of the team, making sure as I'm pulled into these new areas, learning new aspects of the business, what it takes to run a public company, that my team is well taken care of, with people who are ideally even better at what they do than I was. And so far, building a company with a great mission around Bitcoin, a opportunity for an incredible adventure with a lot of volatility and a lot of upside. I'm lucky that it attracts extremely talented, exceptional people. And that has never really been an issue for Fold. It's really been, what type of person do we need at this stage of the company? And I think this current one we're in, as being public, as the company continues to scale, we have been able to build out an incredible executive team that not only has managed the volatility of running a public company, but also is here deeply for the mission of Bitcoin.
So Chase mentioned earlier, we've only ran private businesses. And while I didn't run eBay, I was at eBay when I was on their treasury team and did a lot with investor relations. I always wished that we were private. I felt like eBay would be able to move at a higher velocity, make riskier decisions perceived, and not worry about what Wall Street has to say. So I'm curious, what do you miss most about being a private company? Was there anything that you took for granted?
Uh, Being able to be on podcasts like this and just literally say whatever. I have now have a an internal filter to some extent. But no, I mean, I think that's absolutely an aspect of it. And I think a lot of it is there's a lot of truth to what you have said. And I think being a public company adds a ton more overhead and in some ways operational inefficiencies at some point to be able to operate. But also, I think it is used as a crutch also that just identifies organizations that have kind of collapsed in and of themselves. And once that happens, the public company overhead becomes really crushing. And so I think for Fold, it's always been managing the culture, but also managing really from the outset that Fold is building for the long term. We do things different from day one. And so we often try to just break these expectations right out of the gate. We are building a large Bitcoin treasury. We are building a Bitcoin financial services company for the future when Bitcoin is underpinning the financial system. All of those things are, in some ways, fringe or, they give us the leeway to still operate with boldness and following our vision because there's really no incumbents that we can kind of measure ourselves against. Now, that's going to change in the next 5 to 10 years, and I can revisit this. But right now, access to public markets allows us to accelerate at a time that I think it is incredibly valuable to accelerate in. And this window that we have is not going to be open and much longer. And I think we've learned that firsthand already being a Bitcoin company at the behest of Bitcoin's own cycles. We've seen what happens on what you can do when you can take advantage of the momentum of Bitcoin volatility upside. And we've seen what happens when Bitcoin volatility, the downside comes in and no one's around you anymore. All those people you thought were here to support or potential investors, only the real ones remain, which helps create a lot of clarity. But it also shows you how kind of capricious the rest of the market is and views Bitcoin. They don't hold a long-term understanding of it, at least for the most part. And so I think we've got a great group that have created the core and really is here to, we have to make bold decisions. Bitcoin is not a commodified market yet at this point. The services and tools that are here are just becoming at the level of being mature and ready for mass market. And so this is the point where we have full, I think, ability to be bold, still follow our vision. That's what our shareholders, including the shareholders that we've gotten from being a public company, that's what they want us to do. They want us to buy Bitcoin and produce, innovative Bitcoin financial services that usher in hyper Bitcoinization. Like that's what we do, and that's a really wide berth for us to be able to get in to maintain, be creative. And at the end of the day, Fold is a 40 plus person company, very small. So I don't think we'll be being crushed under the weight of our bureaucracy yet. And at this point, we've only seen really the upside of being a public company.
Hopefully, this next one doesn't brush up against your new internal filter as a public facing CEO too much. But your original Series A was led by the crypto czar himself, David Sachs. So, assuming you could or had a moment to whisper into his ear, what would be your recommended budget neutral Bitcoin acquisition strategy for the United States SBR?
This is easy. I think Elon with Doge found something like 10 million plus credit cards that were being used by the federal government to purchase and run their operations. So my very self-serving answer, Chase, is that we should replace them all with a Fold Bitcoin Rewards credit card, stack 2% on all the federal government's purchases, budget neutral, and at the size of of the volumes here would be fairly significant in terms of being able to build a Bitcoin treasury.
There we go. He hit the softball out of the park, ladies and gentlemen. Last question here, and hopefully it's a fun one. It's something that we've been tossing around on this pod before it became a trend. The idea of a Mount Bitcoin, sort of playing off of the idea of Mount Rushmore. I posted mine last week. I had Satoshi, Hal, Andreas, and Ross in mine.
Yeah.
So curious, who would be your 4 Bitcoin builders or Bitcoin icons in Mount Bitcoin?
Man, you kind of let off with the absolute star stud. I mean, I think Satoshi Hal has to be. Andreas was absolutely critical to my own orange pilling, and so I think those are you can't get better than that. I'm trying to think of some kind of controversial one to
Sure.
add to your.
Let me maybe flip it for you. How about this? Bitcoin entrepreneur Mount Rushmore.
Okay. Well, okay. I got a lot of, I think, uh, building in the Bitcoin space has been one of the, best and most exciting parts of my life that I feel like I've been lucky to be part of because the caliber of entrepreneurs, the grit and the vision is extraordinary. And so some of my, I remember, I think, we've been built and also been building, like we've gone from 0 to 1 all, together in many respects. And so I think some of the more obvious ones, but I would say for builders, uh, ones who I'm really fans of, I love Alex at River. I think what he has built is very special. I think Jack Mallers has consistently been an executor and single-handedly kind of expanding the Overton window in many ways across what Bitcoin can do. But I think those two get a lot of praise at other smaller builders who are executing on even, I think, as large of visions, or someone like Paulie Toy out of Stackwork has, I think, provides one of the most clear-eyed and views of what true Bitcoin adoption can mean and how it can directly help people, and has been, I think everything from Stackwork and some of his lightning chats has been just an absolute visionary, but doesn't get nearly enough of the credit that he does deserve. Um, I think there are some of the early builders. I think we have Bull Bitcoin, I think, is a great example of a team that has stood very solidly to the founding cypherpunk principles of Bitcoin. And I think that's hard to do as a builder that's both reaching mass markets of people and that there's always trade-offs. And they have done an incredible job at balancing that and staying true to the roots. And I think really represents something unique in the market. Someone who's very focused on bringing products and services to a mass market that stay true to the cypherpunk vision. I think Adam Back is incredible, both from how long he has been and how he's been influential, not only before Bitcoin and contributing to the actual founding, but also in what he has done at Blockstream and some of the other projects he's been involved with has been just consistent the whole way through. So hopefully peppered a few more of them there, but I think I would. Some of my favorite builders are ones that I think I don't think they've gotten the praise that they should, and are perhaps executing on some of the most grand visions for Bitcoin.
Absolutely. We stand on the backs of giants, and shout out to all those guys, Alex and everyone you mentioned. I think here's a good place to wrap, unless there's anywhere else you want to go with it, Will. If not, would love to give you an opportunity to plug where to follow you on socials and find what y'all are working on at Fold.
Well, I think the best place is Twitter. Is just join us in the arena on Twitter. I'm at WLRVS, but Fold app is there. We are very close to our customers, so ideas for features often get into the product. We will openly discuss as much as we can these days, and we have a lot of great things coming up, including our Bitcoin Rewards credit card. We got an announcement coming up very soon on something else as well, and so I think it's going to be a really exciting 2025, both at Fold and for Bitcoin. I just don't think the backdrop could not be more bullish, and I feel like the spring is absolutely loaded at this point, and it's going to be a fun ride for all of us.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on the pod.
Thanks, Will.
It's a pleasure, guys.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the show. Quick reminder that New Foundations is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing should be construed as investment, financial, or legal advice. Business owners, business operators, and those who are Bitcoin curious, let's connect. Visit acropolistreasury.com to learn more or to get in touch with our team.